Today, Trump's defenders took over, and the prediction was that they would engage in quite a bit of whataboutism, trying to distract from what Trump did or imply that other people using similar words in different contexts was somehow the same. Well, they did, and we're gonna show you some, but understand that these excerpts are like cut to the bone, stripped not just of context, but everything. So let me quickly add in a bit of context. In all of these instances, the individual using the word fight or something like it, both didn't want physical violence, but whether you believe that or not, note that none of the instances you're about to see ended in a violent insurrection. So that said, here is the presentation from Trump's defending lawyers.
And there's more.
I promise to fight every single day. One, I'm a fighter and I'm relentless, but I'm a fighter and I'm relentless. A fighter and I'm relentless. I will fight like hell.
But the way I see it now is that we pick ourselves up and we fight back. That's what I think it's all about.
Fight that fight.
We have been fighting.
I was fighting very hard.
Time is of the essence, both in terms of the fight.
I think we should be fighting.
Well, I really believe we need to fight.
And we're simply not going to take this line down. We're going to keep fighting.
So I'm telling all my colleagues, this is the fight of our life.
So Tim Kaine notably did not then go take a dump in the speaker's office or anything like that. There wasn't any actual violence because it turns out the context does actually matter. For instance, the context we're in, you might think without it that we're in a democracy and we have people who are gonna be impartial jurors, but the context is that we have a bunch of partisan hacks who don't care about any of this and they're just gonna decide based on their pre-existing disposition. But guys, what do you think about this turn in the trial?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm gonna shock the world in a second. So you have that to look forward to. But second of all, yes, is context important? Of course, no one has ever committed so much as a jaywalking infraction after an Elizabeth Warren speech. Tim Kaine, I don't think is capable of inspiring violence or any physical action or even getting up out of your chair. So is it different? Of course it's different. Now the unspoken thing here that the media can't say and the politicians can't say is the audience is different. So if Elizabeth Warren's given a speech about fighting like hell to raise taxes on the top 1% so the rest of us can have education and healthcare, nobody thinks, let's go commit violence to get healthcare. Like that's not a thing. It's never been a thing. If you want to make an argument about protests in the streets that are related to police violence, that's a different conversation because it's not a political conversation. And no politician told them to go do that, encouraged them to do that, et cetera, right? And so that is that human beings are reacting to a situation they're in where they have met with violence. But that is a separate topic than Democrats inciting violence. Democrats can't even incite people off the couch, and they don't want them off the couch 9 out of 10 times, let alone physical violent action. Whereas the Trump mob, everybody knows it's violent. And if I said that before January 6th, the right wing, and by the way, some portion of the mainstream media would have been outraged. How could you say that about beloved Republican voters, right? No, I've always told you they're violent. We know why, because of overwhelming evidence. Every time they go somewhere, they talk about bringing their guns. Sometimes they bring their guns, sometimes they murder people. And a lot of times they do domestic right-wing terrorist attacks, planning to bomb buildings, pipe bombs, attacks against synagogues, you name it, they've done it. So the problem was half the speaker and half the audience. Trump knew that he was gonna rile them up, and he knew they were violent, and he looked forward to that violence. So the reason people don't say that is because they're afraid of offending Republican voters. But a Republican crowd is more violent. It's super obvious, and January 6th proved it. I'll save my shocking conclusion for in a second, but I'm curious what Maz thinks.
Going off of your thing of different audiences, first of all, I've been kind of sporadically watching, and what I was doing when the House was presenting the prosecution, I was flipping to Fox to see if they're covering it. And they were covering other stuff. They weren't showing the prosecution. And I don't know if they came around to showing it, but they sure as hell weren't showing it before. And then today, when I flipped there, and they had Trump's defense team answering some questions, they were showing it. And they're using that whataboutism, as you guys are saying so clearly. And I'll tell you, Cenk, you're absolutely right about, as a comedian, I experienced the evolution of Trump, because before Trump ran, he was a clown that everybody would laugh about. You know, he had The Apprentice. I had a couple of innocuous jokes I would do in my show about him, and nobody cared. Couple of chuckles, move on. Once he started spewing racist crap and talking about immigrants this, Mexicans that, Muslims this, all that stuff. These people that you're talking about who sit in those audiences of his, and they're going, yeah, elbow these people in the face, and the Democrats are communists, and let's get these immigrants out of here. They got riled up back then, and they started getting really, really upset at any joke you made about Trump, to the point where, as a stand-up comedian over the past 4 years, I would get anxiety when I would approach my Trump jokes, because I knew that some Trump fan was gonna lose their mind and start screaming at me. So you're absolutely right. They are more riled up and more violent. And the last thing I wanna say, the ridiculousness of this whataboutism and this clip they're showing about the word fight, fight, fight. I don't know where they get these clowns. I know that his original legal team quit, and I'm guessing that this is like the next level down. This is the minor leagues. I don't know who they are, but it's such a joke. I was waiting for them to be like, and speaking of the word fight, what about the Beastie Boys when they were fighting for their right to party? What about that? What about Fight Club? They should have just shown the Fight Club for an hour and a half. Look at how many times they say fight in that. Was that about starting a riot? Which, by the way, it was. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, what about Hillary's fight song? Oh, what about that? Yeah, there's this debate, and this is really what all of this is about, where we would say they understood what Trump wanted and he liked what they did. And the defense says they misunderstood Trump. This isn't what he wanted at all. And so Trump isn't gonna testify, so we don't get to ask him direct questions, but he said the things. They went there and did all of this stuff, hours of footage, and Pence had to be rushed out, and people died, and all of that. And then he tweets, "These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever." That comment gets us to his motivations. And which of those two positions is that more consistent with? That he was badly misunderstood by a crowd of people who didn't get that he didn't want any of this, or a crowd of people who got what he wanted, and as reports from the day say, he was enjoying watching the footage, he liked what he was seeing. Every statement he put out, which of those two positions is it more compatible with? And that is, it's almost an insulting thing to even ask, because everybody knows that he acted exactly like a person who had not been misunderstood, that they got exactly what he wanted, that that's what he called them there to do, and he was perfectly happy with what they did. They were asked to talk about that exact tweet, and of course they dissemble and they make it about something else because they can't actually answer to it. When that went out, you know that Trump's team was hating it. And let alone all of what was talked about yesterday, where why is it then, if Trump had nothing to do with this, everyone, including Republicans, were desperately trying to get him to call them off on the day? If he had nothing to do with it, if he had no power over it, why was he the one that everyone was looking to call these murderous thugs out of the Capitol building? It's all so insulting. It's all so pointless. We all know exactly what happened. There's just some people that aren't going to admit it because it's not politically beneficial to them.
Yeah, so John's last point is such a great one. I'm gonna come back to it in a second. So my opinion is a little bit more nuanced, and hence the so-called shocking the world. Look, I'm not sure that I would vote to convict Trump. And so that might surprise you guys. And the reason is, as usual, the Democrats didn't charge him in the right ways. So in the first impeachment, he had broken 5 very clear laws. but they didn't charge him with any of the laws that he had broken. They came in with like super vague stuff of we don't like him. I'm like, God, you guys are so bad at this. But I would have voted to convict on those because the underlying issue was the 5 criminal violations, and they were clear. In this case, I'm a little worried about precedent because he did use generic words like fight like hell, march down to the Capitol. If it was a criminal case, I'd be really surprised if anyone could convict based on those words. And yes, other people have used them in a completely different context, in front of a completely different crowd with a completely different reaction. But and remember, this is not a legal conviction. This is a political conviction. So that makes it more likely that I would vote yes. But I would have to hear all the evidence, and I'm not 100% sure. Just because I'm worried about the precedent, then who do they use that against? Oh, you said fight like hell. That's it. That's an insurrection. No, I don't want that precedent.
Well, one important follow-up question would be: is there an insurrection?
Yeah, that's exactly, John. So look, now let's get to the other side of it. Evidence to say that it was right, that he had incited an insurrection. What he did after the speech to me is way more damning than what he said in the speech. So we know that he called Tommy Tuberville right around when Pence was being removed from the building, because it's on the record as Tuberville saying, I told him the vice president just got taken out of the Senate chamber, okay? And we know that happened at 2:13. So Trump knows that Pence's life is in danger. At 2:26, 13 minutes later, he tweets about how Pence is a terrible guy who didn't do the right thing. Oh my God, he knew they're in the building. He knew they had already broken in and committed violence. He knew they were going after Pence, and he encouraged them. To me, that probably would be the #1 reason to convict. And then John makes a devastating point. Lindsey Graham and almost every other Republican senator was trying to call Donald Trump in a panic. Now, if they thought he didn't incite the riot, why are they calling Trump? They didn't call me. They didn't call Elizabeth Warren. They didn't call Bernie Sanders. Why did they call Trump? Because they know he started it and they know he could have ended it. And eventually, after hesitating, and to me, where I would tip the scales and vote yes for conviction is if they could show definitive proof that Trump said to not send in the National Guard. When he was told that there is violence, people's lives are in danger, including the senators, including Mike Pence, and we need to send the National Guard. And if he said no, I would say that's it. No, he knew for sure, and he definitely wanted the violence. I vote yes on incitement of insurrection. But we're not anywhere near those issues because we have the Republicans saying it's unconstitutional to even consider any evidence. So they're basically going la 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 la, right? And that argument is 100% false. We have definitely convicted people after they have left office. And just logically, guys, think about it for 1 second. If they were right and somebody was about to get convicted on any impeachment at any level, right? They just, like, one of the consequences of impeachment and conviction is that you could never serve in political office again. They have a separate vote on that, but they can only have that vote after conviction, right? So if somebody was a crook and they got caught being a crook, just simple, like bribery, right? If Trump's lawyers were right, they would resign right before they got convicted. A minute before, I'm gonna lose the vote. They're at 49, they're about to go to 51, whatever the number is, right? He says, okay, I resign. Haha, now I can run for office again. No, of course not. Of course that's not true. So yes, they can do this trial, no question about it. Yes, they can convict, and I would need to hear more about the National Guard, and that would probably put me over the top to saying yes. But I am a little worried about generic words being cited as incitement to insurrection. So that's what I understand.
From what I understand, and I think you were talking about this, it's not a criminal case as much as it is a political case. So they got to show that there's, I think, is it high crimes and misdemeanors? Isn't that what they say? And so based on that, a couple of things that were interesting. One was I saw a tweet, I think, from Peter Souza, the Obama photographer, who said, I would be interested to see if there's photographs of Trump during this time while this is all happening. And I'm not sure if they told the White House photographer stop taking pictures or not, but that could definitely help, maybe, if nothing else, show him all jovial or walking around going, why is everyone so down, or whatever that expression is, that could add to it. But the other thing that for me is a bit of a mystery on the Democratic side, why did they not call witnesses? I know they tried to call Trump and he said no. Did they try to call Pence? Like, Pence would be a great person to talk to right now. Did he say no? Are there other witnesses? Like, I think they should have had witnesses that were able to give some firsthand testimony about what was going through, what kind of conversations were happening. Were they able to call Tommy Tuberville? I don't know. Are they able to? Does anybody know the answer to that?
Yeah, and so look, a couple of things there. Maz is absolutely right. So what would I have done instead if I was Democrats? First of all, I would have put in a charge about specifically lying to undermine democracy, undermine a democratically held election, right? So I think that on a political conviction, on a political issue like impeachment, to me, that's plenty enough to impeach. We know for a fact that he lied 1,000 times. We know for a fact he tried to undermine our democracy. That is not in dispute at all. So charge him with that. That's plenty enough for impeachment, and I would impeach and convict on that super easy. Then secondly, why not be more aggressive? So the House managers did a great job in their presentation. So I'm not knocking them. I'm so proud of Jamie Raskin, who's a great progressive and put on a terrific case, okay? But where I would get more aggressive is exactly what Ma said in the witnesses. I'm gonna call everybody who was in the room with Donald Trump when they were discussing the National Guard. Now, I know they discussed the National Guard, that's already in the news. And every report says that he was reluctant to call out the National Guard. And in fact, there's even reports that he didn't, that it was Pence who eventually ordered the National Guard in. Well, get Pence or anyone else in the room and then drill him and not let him off the hook. Did he or did he not order the National Guard? Did he or didn't he? No, you have to answer the question. It's not optional. If you don't, I don't care if you're Mike Pence. If I call you as a witness and you're under oath and you do not answer my question, that's contempt of Congress and you will go to prison. Did he order the National Guard in or didn't he? If he didn't, knowing that there's violence, he's definitely guilty. He wanted the insurrection and he was thrilled with the insurrection. And guys, last thing for me on this, he never apologized to Pence. Imagine that you gave a speech. Look, there's two parts of this. And maybe you gave a speech to like 10,000 people on a progressive issue and they got all riled up and 3 of them went down somewhere and busted windows. Well, that's not on you guys. It's 3 randos. There's always gonna be 3 randos. But what if thousands of people after your speech went and did something incredibly violent and they started chanting, and to pick a progressive ally, because Mike Pence is Trump's vice president, and they started chanting about hanging a fellow progressive, and they had a noose with them, and they almost got him. Wouldn't you be mortified? Wouldn't you call that guy and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were gonna do that. No, it wasn't a couple of guys, it was thousands. And Trump never apologized because he was actually super happy it happened. And you could tell, any human being can tell he was happy, because if you had done that, even if you're a conservative and you did not intend it, and it turns out your fans caused massive violence and were looking to kill people, I would hope as a decent human being, you would be apologetic about that, even if you didn't intend it. Whereas Trump looks at it and does that smile he has, like, Well, then you just told us you wanted it and you were happy with it.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.